Hey, everybody. I wanted to welcome you tonight to this gathering. We're hoping to hear from Julie Kirschbaum about transit recovery here in San Francisco. But as we get started, I want to do just a couple of housekeeping things. So first, I want to thank our various supporters. We received generous support from Transit Center, who supplies us with some grants that makes our work possible. Our board of directors, of course, works very hard to support the work of staff and to allow us to do the work that we do. The SFTR staff, the terrific folks who actually make this ship go. We've got B-Rod in District 6 in the Tenderloin doing community organizing. We've got Sarah, who's in District 9 and the Mission District doing community organizing. We've got Eric out in District 11 doing community organizing, as well as championing our STAY program, which works with high school age youth in the city, helping to teach them about advocacy and then turning them loose to do the kind of campaigns for the kind of transit that they need. So that's really great. And of course, absolutely, we value and appreciate the support of our members who make a lot of our work possible and who, quite frankly, are the heart and soul of our organization. So we are absolutely thrilled to have that much support. We've got a few things coming up that I'd like to let you know about. One is we'll be hosting a regional transit forum on June 10th. This will involve Tilly Chang from the CTA and Josefowitz from MTC, and they'll be talking about some of the issues related to our regional transportation system. There is a Voices for Public Transportation, Disability, and Accessibility Forum on June 24th that we are excited to have folks participating in. We have got a new member happy hour coming up at the end of June. Don't tell anybody, but we're thinking we might be able to do this one in person. So we're really excited about that one. And we'll be getting an update on congestion pricing from CTA probably in early July. So we'll be looking forward to that. We absolutely could use your support. The easiest way to do that is to go to sftransit.org/donate. I'm sure Zach will drop that into the chat for us, and become a member. We would love to have folks involved in our work and supporting good, great public transportation in San Francisco. If you're a member, you get to come to forums like this one, although some of them we do just for our membership. We have working groups of our members who help drive policy and advocacy with our organization. And so there's a lot happening, and we'd really love for you to be a part of it. So do check out our website, sftransit.org. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. It is a terrific way to get more involved and more informed about San Francisco's public transportation and about the work that we do to get it to be the world-class system that, frankly, San Francisco deserves. Our plan for tonight is to let our guest, Julie Kirschbaum, have the floor to talk about transit recovery for about 30 minutes or so, maybe as much as 40, depending on her presentation. And then that'll be followed by a moderated question and answer session, which will be led by Kat Carter, our Director of Communications. If you want to submit questions, please use the Zoom Q&A tool or the chat. Staff will do our best to moderate the questions, and we may combine some just because it tends to happen that we get a few questions about a particular line, and it's easier to sort of put those together. So if you don't hear your specific question asked, hopefully we will have captured at least some of what you were hoping to know about, but we will do our best to get as much information there as we can. Before I introduce our featured guest this evening, Julie Kirschbaum, I do want to acknowledge the tragedy that happened in the South Bay with the VTA staff. We are shocked and horrified, and as kind of big as the transportation world can seem sometimes, it's also very small, and it does feel like family. We know staff, we know riders, we know union members at the ATU. You know, it is a small-ish world, and we really are a family of people, a community really seeking to make transit better throughout the Bay Area and in San Francisco. And so I want to invite you to a moment of silence to just reflect for a moment on the events in the South Bay, and particularly with an eye towards thinking about support for those families. We've sent out several emails and tweets that provide you a way to support those families directly, and please do look for those. But for this time, I think it best that we pause for a moment of silence, and you may do with that whatever you like, but we hope you will use it as an opportunity to send your care and support down to the South Bay, to those families and to that community, and of course to the staff and folks working at VTA. So let us pause together. Thank you so much. That's a rather somber introduction, but I think it is a healthy reminder that transportation, for all of its infrastructure, for all of its built environment, for all of the things that go into it, ultimately is about people. It is about drivers and operators and SFMTA staff that make the system run. It is about the people that ride Muni or ride public transportation. It is about the way that public transportation can sadly divide cities when it's done poorly, and wonderfully bring cities and communities together when it's done well. It is my great pleasure to introduce Julie Kirschbaum, who since 2019 has been the Director of Transit at SFMTA. She led the first system-wide overhaul of Muni in a generation, which then became the Muni Forward program. And there's little doubt that COVID has tested all of us, of course, during its time, and our public transportation as well. And I'd like to just take a moment to thank Julie and the SFMTA staff for, quite frankly, the multiple iterations of service that they've attempted to execute during the pandemic. In the last 15 months, it has been a Herculean task. We were talking with some transit planners yesterday just about kind of the work that they have done. And that goes all the way up and all the way down the system at SFMTA. And so with that, I want to welcome Julie to our event this evening. And Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give your presentation and share a bit with us about transit recovery if you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to just briefly give Sean an opportunity to say hello. He has a conflict, so he's not going to be able to join us for the whole session, but any questions that I can't answer, Sean promised that he would follow up on, and I'm going to take good notes.
Great. Thanks, Julie, and thanks, everyone. Super excited to be here tonight. Thank you for having us, giving the opportunity to talk to you all about the reopening, and just appreciate all your support the last 15 months, as Mark said. But going forward, we're going to have a lot of opportunity for engagement and talking about the system and how it looks post-COVID in the post-COVID world. So excited to work with you all, and thanks for joining tonight as a great first step. So like Julie said, I'll have to bow out early, but I will stay as long as I can, and we'll follow up if any questions are unanswered.
So I'm Julie Kirschbaum. It's my honor to be the transit director at SFMTA. It's a job of a lifetime, but also incredibly challenging. And this year, really, we wouldn't have made it through without all of the hard work and amazing contributions of the SFMTA staff. Sean's team, the transit planning team alone, have reinvented the service 3 or 4 times. Our operators have gone out every day in pretty scary conditions, and everybody from our car cleaners to our mechanics to our communications team and revenue teams have been supporting the work. So we are really grateful to be here, and to be here really to talk about how we're getting back to normal and some of the really positive momentum that we see. I'm gonna make an attempt to share my screen. Can you all see that? Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah, Julie, I can see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the service is performing and our most recent service restoration, but really focus tonight on what we're aiming for start of school and really hopefully a large scale return to office in August. The no minute of the COVID period went to waste, and I'm really proud of all of the work that the SFMTA crews got done. We did not want to have to shut down the rail system. We certainly didn't want to have to shut it down a second time after we ran into issues in August, but the time has really contributed to what I believe will be a much more resilient subway. I want to share with you some of the behind the scenes work. That photo up in the right corner, I don't know if anybody can identify it, but that's actually the rail grinding machine. It's the size of a small house. It allows our track to really extend its useful life and also smooth out the ride for customers. Just bringing it into the city is kind of an ordeal, and being able to get the entire subway done during the shutdown was a huge accomplishment. We also replaced ballast along the Eureka curve in Twin Peaks Tunnel. That's going to allow for better drainage and long-term maintenance. The photo in the bottom right corner is our overhead lines team. They replaced every splice in the subway and removed dozens of splices because they also ran 1,000 feet of new wire. And they reduced slow zones. 2 were eliminated and 1 was pretty significantly reduced. And so for those of you that have a chance to ride in the subway, hopefully what you're experiencing is a quicker ride from end to end. And then finally, not shown in this slide, but we did get approved 20 miles of temporary transit lanes, many of which are up and running and protecting us from the pretty significant congestion that we're starting to see return. Based on some of the lessons in August, we really wanted to make sure that the system was ready before we started service. So we ran 2 weeks of mock service leading up to it to really test out and stress the infrastructure. We also used that time to practice service disruptions. With all the incredible work we got done over COVID, it's still only down payment for the major work ahead. We estimate that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're gonna need to replace almost $1 billion worth of infrastructure in the subway. The track is past its useful life from Castro to Embarcadero, including the special crossovers at Castro, Van Ness, and Embarcadero and Church and DuBose, very complex pieces of infrastructure. The train control system also needs to be replaced, along with, a lot of other related things like station agent boost, fire life safety, things like that. So that's a long way of saying that we're not out of the woods, and there's still going to be instances where we experience disruptions in the subway. And so we took those 2 weeks to practice. This photo here is an operations drill where one of our managers disabled a switch, and the signal crew had opportunity to go detect what was wrong, get it back up and running. Our communication folks practiced what their public communications would have been, and we put in an alternative service plan. Not everything went perfectly, and that's okay because we were doing it to learn and to improve for next time. Thank you to all of you that are out to celebrate the opening of the subway. For the most part, our service performed as planned. But Saturday, May 15th was a hectic day. We had demonstrations that went completely off of their planned route. So 10 to 12 of our busiest routes, we were rerouting on the fly. We also had a pretty significant issue with the train control system, and there's a lot going on. We are in the process right now of hiring almost 100 transit supervisors. These are entry-level supervisors who work in everywhere from our divisions to our train control, our transportation management center, to out on the street. And without them, we are still very stretched on service management. So Saturday was a day where we really needed to do crisis management, and we didn't have the staffing we needed to also be doing line management. But over the next 6 to 8 months, as we get those new folks trained, it's really going to bolster our ability to both and to really enhance the service. We had a really fun day, though. There were lots of kids out on lines like the Judah waving to the train and welcoming it back. Customers, I think, really appreciated the quicker travel time, the 4th and King bottleneck being an important one, along with the slow zones in the subway. And did, I think, really benefit from having the mock service time, because operators were ready and could focus just on the customer experience. We had staff, over 200 staff out, including bilingual staff, interacting with our customers and hopefully bringing a little joy to the service. And as I said, we did have to troubleshoot, and we are continuing to have some issues with the train control system between Castro and Church in the inbound direction. The train control system is very antiquated and relies on very precise infrastructure, including what you see in the middle of the track here, with a loop cable. And when there's any sort of communication issues with that loop cable, it can be very hard to detect, and it can impact the trains. In this case, it's been a very tricky challenge for us because it's not happening with every train, making the problem that much more complex to detect. But we have already replaced about 700 feet of loop cable, and we're going to continue until we have this problem solved. But we appreciate everybody that's been to subway, and if you've been on a train that's slow through the area, that's why. My 10-year-old is writing a book report right now on Muni, which has been pretty fun. And she interviewed one of MTA's retired staff. And one of the things she asked him is, what was the hardest year in Muni history? And he had a couple of examples, but really this last year is what jumped out on the page. And it's because we saw our ridership plummet almost 90%. We were carrying over 700,000 people a day pre-COVID, and we had a low of below 100,000. I'm really pleased that we're back to 30% of our pre-pandemic ridership. It's over 200,000 people a day. But we do expect a slow recovery, and it's going to take us, I think, several years to get back and then exceed that 700,000 number. So this is an interesting number, because on the one hand, 30% is low. On the other hand, 200,000 people a day are getting where they need to go on our transit system. Throughout COVID, we've, I think, really tried to provide excellent service, because we know not all the service is out there, and we want to get customers where they need to go safely. We've put in a lot of safety protocols, both for our staff and our customers. And we've also had to change how we manage the service. We had very detailed schedules that were based on a city full of congestion, which essentially disappeared overnight. And it required us to go to managing service on a headway, which we plan to take past the COVID period, because it allows the operators to drive to the conditions, to drive safely, and really just focus on not getting too close to the vehicle in front of them. And from a customer perspective, what that means is more consistent wait times, and much less likely experiencing 2 or 3 buses coming at the same time. And the data has borne out some of that success. Our rapid work, we're showing almost 90% headway adherence. That means that if a bus is supposed to come every 8 minutes, that 90% of the time is coming in 8 plus 5 minutes, which is 13 minutes. Customers don't have to wait longer than they expect. And the rest of our routes that we're managing are getting very close to 85% headway adherence. And we expect that to improve, as I said, we get more inspectors into the system. In May, we saw the return of the F line, as well as KT, the Anjuda, and a hilltop service, which was basically a combination of the 36 and the Diamond Heights portion of the 52, in order to help some seniors get off of the hill. Like all of the difficult service changes that we made, it was really grounded in our values. First and foremost being to provide a safe transportation system, one that is raising up the people who need the service the most and grounded in equity. Also really, as I said, focused on giving people alternative choices to driving, helping with climate change, and supporting our economy. We simply don't have the space in San Francisco for everybody to drive their personal cars, even if we wanted them to. And so having a transportation system, a multimodal system that can support alternative choices is critical to us restoring to normal. We have made a lot of changes over the last 15 months. In April of 2020, we went down to a 17 route network. That was at a time when we really had very little information about COVID. We did not even have protective equipment like masks. We did not have mask mandates. And we were seeing very, very significant declines in available staffing. As we were able to put in new procedures, as we learned more, we saw staff return, and we were able to steadily restore service. So we went from a low of about 45% of our pre-COVID hours to now we're at about 70%. All of the choices that we made during COVID were grounded in those values, including really providing service to our equity neighborhoods that had the fewest choices and oftentimes didn't have the luxury of working at home. We tried to supplement where we were able to provide service with programs like our ETC, for seniors and people with disabilities to be able to access more cost-effectively our taxi program. In August, we are going to be adding a additional significant amount of service back. We're able to do that because we're working towards getting back to pre-COVID capacities and our pre-COVID cleaning regiments by June 15th, when a lot of city and state rules around COVID are going to be changing. We've been working in lockstep with the public health department on those changes, and they also feel that it's the right time to return. Some of the things we will continue to require masks on Muni and at transit stops. That's an FTA, Federal Transit Administration requirement, and one that we believe is important to keep customers safe on board. We will also be continuing on our buses to leave windows open and to really encourage air circulation. We also have very good air circulation from the doors opening as well. For the August changes, we prioritize connectivity, covering service gaps, providing access to our hilly routes, and adjusting routes to match past ridership or to avoid trouble spots. We are really reallocating service for the most part, not growing service a lot. We still need additional time to hire and train staff. And so really stretching and trying to be as creative as possible so that people can get where they need to go. What we were not able to prioritize were things like parallel service, routes like the 21 Hayes, for example, which has nearby options with the Fulton. We were not able to bring back express service, but we do have good rapid options on most of our express corridors. And we were not, in many cases, able to bring single seat rides to downtown. You'll see as I present, for example, how we're covering the 6 Parnassus. We're covering all the hilltop 6 Parnassus stops, but then ask people to make a connection to continue their downtown trip. This is a snapshot of all of the changes. I'm going to go through them quickly, but happy to answer any questions. Kind of hot off the press. So for those of you that watched either the TA board or the TA board, you wouldn't have seen this, but based on feedback and some additional number crunching, we are going to be bringing back the full 28 route. We've been running it to 6th in California and not extending it over into the Marina and over to Galileo High School, but we will be bringing the 28 back in August. We'll also be extending the 48, which has been starting at West Portal, to Ocean Beach. We'll also be extending the 12 into the Mission and adding a new connection to Rincon Hill, which has been approved for a couple years now, but was actually stalled because of COVID in terms of implementation. We will also be restoring the 5R, the 18, 36, and the 39. We will be reintroducing school trippers. For those of you that have middle school or high school kids, you may be familiar with this, but for those of you that don't, some of our busiest middle school and high schools, we start an empty bus or two at the end of the school day, so that kids can board out overcrowding our regular routes. And then we do still make all of the stops leading from the school. We did have to eliminate some school trippers, so there will be some schools, particularly schools that are near routes that have capacity, because the school trippers are typically connected to our express service. So a route will pull out at 2 in the afternoon, it'll do a school trip, and then it'll go down to downtown to be an express route. So we're gonna have to come up with some creative ways to provide that school service. We will also be providing the 23 Monterey, but it'll go from Bayview into the Westboro Village. The 35 Eureka will be restored, but we will operate slightly differently through Noe Valley to cover the 48 segment. The 52 will run its entirety, as well as picking up some of the Golden Gate Heights portions of the 6 Parnassus. The 56 Rutland will be restored in entirety, and it will also be expanded to make connections to the 29 Sunset. This was something that was part of our 2019 equity strategy. The 57 will be restored, but it will be split into 2 routes, and I'll go over that on the map. And the 66 will also be fully restored. We'll cover some of the 6. There are some routes like the 9 and the 9R. We will be reducing service a little bit to pre-COVID levels in order to help with this additional service restoration. This is a map of all of the service that we're restoring. You will see the 28 connection, because as I said, that's a hot off the press change. With these changes, we're able to go from 91% of residents being within 2 to 3 blocks of transit to 98% of residents. So this is really, these changes are really about connectivity and coverage. This map here, the dark pink is every transit stop in the city with a 1/4 mile buffer around it. You can see we still have some coverage gaps with the May changes. The light pink showing through shows how the August changes will help close those gaps. I'm going to very briefly go through the routes. So this is the 35 change. Instead of going on Eureka, it will go on Douglas and Hoffman. The 12 Folsom will extend into Recon Hill on Main Spear before heading over to the Mission. It will not go directly to the 24th Street BART. It's a change that causes a lot of delay and travel time and is not well utilized. So we will be focusing on serving Chavez. The 23 and 57, this is what their routes were pre-COVID. You can see the 23 extending on Sloat over to the Great Walkway. And the 57 route stopping shy of the Lakeshore Plaza, traveling around Lake Merced into Park Merced and over to West Portal. Under the new change, and I should really emphasize that all of these changes are temporary and really being done in part to stretch resources and in part to address pre-COVID problems like a lot of congestion and complaints. The 23, for example, we're losing upwards of 5 minutes just going through the St. Francis Circle intersection. So we can very cost effectively bring it into the West Portal terminal. The 57 will run from Stonestown through Park Merced to the Daly City BART. And a new 58 route will pick up the Sloat segment of the 23, travel around the lake, go down to the Westlake Shopping Center, past the Daly City BART station, and then make final connection and terminate at the Daly City top of the hill. We are temporarily not going to have service on Brotherhood Way and on Lake Merced. That is an area that we were getting very congested on heading in that kind of J. Sarah intersection. We did look at this several years ago and opted to be on Brotherhood Way instead of the Westlake Shopping Center. We are recommending that we try this again because of very, very low ridership along Brotherhood Way, as well as a new partnership that we have with Samtrans that we did not have really pre-COVID, where they are taking all San Francisco fare media, including our free passes, and can help people make connections at Stonestown. This is the 56 extension. So the solid line is the existing route, and the outline line, the green line with the white, is the extension along Visitation Valley to the 29. And then finally, this is the 66 and the 6 and the 52 pre-COVID. You see the 6 traveling in the hilltop along Passes and then towards downtown along Hay Street, with the 52 stopping at Glen Park. Under the August changes, 52 will be extended. So folks in Golden Gate Heights will have access to Muni Metro at Forest Hill Station and also to the Glen Park BART station. And the 66 will be extended along Parnassus and will terminate at Park at Haight and Stanion. So I know that that was a deep dive. I'm going to go very quickly through next steps because I really want to make sure we have time for questions. The last mode that we did not talk about is cable car. The cable car system we're targeting to start up this fall. We had initially shared that the hours would be 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. We're working right now, and I think we may be able to stretch that so that we can do 7 or 8 a.m. to 9, 10 p.m. So more daytime hours as well as evening. We'll be starting the guideline first because that's the first line we're going to train operators, refresh operators on. But shortly after, within weeks, we'll be starting the Mason line and the California line. It's just, we didn't want to hold off on starting up one line while we train operators on the other lines. There's a lot to do for cable car startup, including some very major maintenance inspections. We have hundreds of alarms along the cable car system that let us know if there's a safety issue and they all need to be tested. We are also hiring and training supervisors to manage the service at the terminals. And we will be conducting a very robust mock service for the cable car to make sure that once it's up and running, it can stay up and running. This is not our last service restoration. We will also be restoring more service this winter. And we'll come back to you all to weigh some trade-offs. We're not going to have resources to deliver everything in early 2022. It is our goal to get additional revenue sources and get to 110% of pre-COVID service. We want the service to grow, and we're very committed to it. But in the short term, we do want to make sure we're using the resources we have where they can be most effective. So we'll be looking at various trade-offs, including reintroducing routes with parallel service, reintroducing express routes, increasing evening service. We're really continuing right now to just run the OWL service after 10 p.m. Or delivering a 5-minute network, including some new investments like the 29 Rapid, which I know the transit riders have been strong advocates for. We have also really shifted our focus to hiring. We've prepared a 12-month hiring needs, starting with mechanics and supervisors. We also are going to be restarting operator training in June and anticipate to start a new class about every 5 weeks. And we are focusing on hiring and training, we're focused on training as many rail and cable car operators as we can. The rail and cable car operators don't need to be hired. They come from our bus world, but light rail alone has about a 13-week training course, so it's very extensive. We are very hopeful that we will be able to start up the M line with the start of SF State, but we are currently really trying to understand what rail resources are, and also looking to see how many folks are going to retire at the end of our fiscal year. We have lost about 30 rail operators to promotions, which is exciting. It's part of what makes Muni an amazing place to work, is that we really do have an amazing ladder of opportunity, but we do need to backfill promotions and retirements. So what the commitment we've made to SF State is that we will know by July where we are with the M line, and we will do our best to run as much train service as possible. And if we're not able to, we will supplement with bus service. And then lastly, we are working to make the 20 miles of temporary transit lanes permanent. starting mid-June with the downtown Mission stretch. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And take any questions. I think, well, Mark, why don't you tell me what's next?
Yeah, Julie, we're going to do question and answer. I think Kat will be handling that. And I'm not sure if Sean is still with us, but I'll put you both in the spotlight along with Kat in just a second here.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'll be on screen hopefully shortly here. Thank you so much, Julie. Yes, I have seen a lot of this material over the last couple of weeks, but it is evolving every moment. And so there's a lot going on and a lot to keep track of. We do have a lot of really great questions from our members. I'm going to start with plans for evening service. There's a few questions about this. One, obviously, bars, restaurants, theaters, et cetera, are going to start opening up, movies, whatever. There's going to be more people wanting transit at night. There's going to be more of the workers in those industries needing transit at night. So like, what are the plans to expand evening service, and when does the ability to stop having, like, I can't remember the term for it, taking the buses back to the yards for cleaning? If they don't have to do that anymore, do you have more flexibility to extend into the more service into the evening? What happens when those, 9 remaining lines that happen at night get too crowded and people are stranded?
Thank you for all of those questions. We are not going to be restoring heavy evening service, the 10 to midnight service, until at least January. We are running more frequent service on the Mission corridor that are on network, and we'll continue to monitor and can add buses to the OWL network as we need to. We are also going to be stopping the midday sanitizing on June 15th. There's really been a de-emphasis of the role of surfaces in our kind of current understanding of COVID. And we will go back to operators relieving each other or starting their shift out in the system. We're losing a lot of time right now having to pull all of the buses and trains into the yards and then pull them all back out. And so a lot of the August changes are enabled because of those efficiencies, but we've just already spent them all. Like, we just, we stretched as much as we could just to be able to get the coverage.
Okay, without adding more post 10 p.m. service in August. Mm-hmm. That's going to be difficult. You've already talked about this to some extent too, but can you talk a little bit more about, we have a lot of people asking about the return of the 31, about when it might be restored. How is SFMTA working with the community stakeholders on addressing those needs? It is a key connection for the Tenderloin towards the west side. It has a high percentage of riders that are seniors, disabled, lower income, and that sort of thing. So I understand prioritizing coverage first before getting to parallel routes, but some of these parallel routes really are key lifelines for some people. So how are you looking at that, and particularly the 31?
So I'm going to have a very similar answer to all of the questions about what isn't running, because our big next trade-off exercise is going to happen kind of very early fall in anticipation of a January or a February start date. So the things that are not running now, like 31, like the evening service, those are all going to be things that we evaluate with feedback from stakeholders like yourselves, and really evaluate them against our values. So we are not going to be out of the woods on trade-offs, but we will be able to restore more this winter than what we're seeing now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess there are more questions sort of piled on to that, which probably have the same answer as well, about people wondering if there's greater efficiencies that can be had in different places. I mean, you're talking about stopping with the mid-shift or starting with the mid-shift swap out on the buses and stuff like that gives you a little more flexibility. We're seeing on a lot of routes right now, there's a lot of empty vehicles or relatively empty vehicles. And, part of that's because we're still in the pandemic and people haven't returned to work and all that yet. Are there ways that you're looking to reallocate more things as soon as possible? Are you just sort of trying to set something that you can plan towards and execute? Or are you constantly reevaluating to try to bring back more of those other things that people need?
We are looking at where we have some capacity. We tried to use our pre-COVID service as almost like a policy threshold. So we tried not to make things worse than what we had pre-COVID, and there's a connection between frequency and people coming back and being able to rely on service. But we did expand some. We do have service that will run less frequently in order to be able to make these changes. We are also we're running into sort of a practical challenge, which is we don't have time to do a bunch of scenarios and to try to get to sort of the optimal resource stretching option, because if we don't lock down the changes this week, we won't be ready for the start of school. In a regular agency, they work for 3 to 6 months on a schedule change. We have, probably the most nimble, but also the most frustrated scheduling team in the country right now, because even, as recently as the last 3 days, we made changes based on what we're hearing from people, like with the 28. I don't claim that this is the absolute optimal service plan, but it really is the best I think that we can get in place in order to be ready for the start of school. We're getting real honest tonight. Is that what we were expecting, Kat?
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. You've redesigned the system half a dozen times in the past year on the fly, and again on things that would normally take a year or 2 or 3 or 5. What's just a detail on?
And that's why I really also want. I also really want to emphasize that nothing that we're doing is permanent, and probably not everything that we're doing is going to work. And we will make adjustments. Like this is again trying to save a bus here, stretch a bus there, make connections, and we'll be monitoring it really closely.
What would you say are the top 1 or 3 whatever obstacles to moving faster, to getting more service back quicker? Like if there's a bottleneck that could be, or
I
is
think
it
there's
impossible?
I think there's a short term and a medium term challenge. In the short term, hiring and training are our biggest bottlenecks. We had about a 15% vacancy at the agency pre-COVID. It's what allowed us to survive COVID, frankly, without having to do layoffs, because we were able to save, I think, almost $100 million off our budget. But we also have done very little hiring over the past year, and we didn't even have a health and safety plan that permitted us to do civil service exams until March. And so we have a lot of catching up to do. And from your time on the Muni working group, we have some positions like operators that had a lot of success recruiting, and we have a City Drive partnership that's helping with commercial licenses, and we have other categories like overhead lines workers, where we're competing with PG&E, and we've put out for 15 vacancies and get one person interested. We've made some, I think, incremental progress there. We had a really great meeting about 3 weeks ago with our electrical workers union and with City College, where we were reviewing an academic program to train new line workers that would be partnered with some safety training and some on-job training. So in the short term, I think hiring and training are our biggest hurdles, and we are investing in human resources and really trying to solve the structural problems that created the situation pre-COVID. But in the medium term, we do have a funding problem. We are balancing our budget for the next several years on almost 30% one-time sources, and we can't commit to expanded staff hiring if we're going to be in a position where we have to lay staff off. We're really excited about the possibility of new funding, and we think that we're trying to use this fall to cast a big vision for what that could look like. I saw someone, not reading all the chat, but I did see a comment about, pre-COVID service levels sucking. And that's fair feedback, because we don't want to get just to 100%. We want to get to 110% and then beyond. But what I'm committed to doing is making sure that when we say we're going to deliver 110% of service, that's how much service goes out every day. And it's not just a plan on paper. And that's what we were living with pre-COVID. And it created reliability problems and other issues and made a system that people couldn't count on.
Yeah. Yep, I remember that. I mean, we had that Muni reliability working group that wrapped up just a few months before COVID hit, and we had a great plan in place for how things were going to get fixed, over the past year, and then COVID happened. So I understand definitely that you're dealing with struggles that predate the pandemic. It's just been compounded. Can you give us a number? If you said it and I missed it, I apologize. Sort of a number of how many operators you're looking to hire this year? Like hire, train, onboard? You have a number? You must have a number.
I do, but I don't have the math, but I think almost 200.
Okay. Let me see what I'm trying to do. Some of the route changes that you're doing. What's the rationale for extending the 52 up to the inner Sunset, Quintara, and 14th? What's the sort of? It's
to cover the stops for the 6 Parnassus that are on the hill.
And do we have plans for the 6 Parnassus? We have a few fans of the 6 with us tonight, or that maybe January.
So that would be a January discussion.
Can you give us
all of the all of the stops in Golden Gate Heights on the 6 will be covered by either the 52 or the 66, and then the remaining stops along Haight Street are covered by the 7.
Right on. A little bit out of this scope, but do you have a current date for the Chinatown, the Central Subway opening? Especially given that the pandemic might have given more time to do some of that construction under 4th Street and Stockton. Is any of that accelerated? Are we saving any time that we might have lost before? Do you know?
I do not have the start date at my fingertips. I know that we're getting ready for my team to really start playing a much bigger role, because after we get through substantial completion, it takes about a year to test all of the systems, to train everybody and to make sure that we're ready to start up. And I know sometimes a year of testing sounds like a lot to people. A lot of it has to do with we find a problem and then it might take months to fix that problem. So for example, if there's a issue with train control software, it's not just a matter of typing a bolt and then continuing on. They actually have to reprogram and then retest everything. So I know that our communications folks are keep everybody up to date on the milestones while we're in that testing period.
Right on. Yep, we're all looking forward to it. Speaking of your communications teams, wayfinding has been a problem with Muni for a long time, and sort of next bus reliability and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about plans to improve real-time prediction reliability, plans for informing people about the route changes, because there's so many route changes that happen all the time? What are the short, medium, and long-term sort of plans to improve Muni wayfinding tools for riders?
Thank you for that question. This is an area that we are making significant investments in. We have an executive director, Jeff Tumlin, who I could only describe as obsessed with signage and wayfinding, and I think is shedding an important light on some of the challenges that you just described. We are working with NextBus to completely rebuild the prediction architecture. It was state-of-the-art technology, 15 years ago. And so we were one of the first people to have predictions, but they're not as good as they can be, and particularly at terminals. The predictions did not transfer smoothly over to headway management because the predictions are really grounded in schedules. So we had to make some trade-offs with how we handled terminals because of the headways. The algorithm work will be rolled out this fall. So I expect better predictions in that time period. And then the actual sign upgrade will follow after that. We're also working to phase out inbound and outbound in our system. I think they work well for locals. I'm super used to it, but for somebody visiting the city, especially somebody, taking the T line, for example, inbound south to Sunnydale can be very confusing. So if you've had a chance to check Church Station or Castro Station, that has all new backlit signage with cardinal signs. You can see from the train much easier. You're getting off at Castro Station. They also, I'm thinking of short and tall people, they actually restored all of the kind of orange 1970s signs and then have the brighter lit ones above it. And we're working closely with the region to make sure that we're using consistent MPC symbols and communication. So it's an area that we're going to continue to invest in, but a lot of work to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I can only imagine that's obviously all that much more difficult with temporary changes that are happening. Can you walk us through that process a little bit of how you educate the operators and try to get it out to the customers and people that don't have smartphones, and how you're thinking about that and working on that?
For when we communicate changes?
Yeah, like communicating all these changes, all these huge rollouts. How does that get to the operators? How does it then get out to customers? And especially, how do you consider customers that don't have smartphones and don't have, other ways, technology helping them?
we've really been muscling it. So starting with, in April of 2020, we put posters at every stop that was losing service. The May 15th changes were no exception, but we had 200 people out in the system for several days, interacting with customers at key decision points, so that they know what was changing, and we would be doing something similar in August. And then also, relying on our website and media and neighborhood groups as well to try to get the word out. But a lot of it has been through signage at stops.
Right on, thanks. I want to talk, there's several questions all over the place about sort of the federal money that's been coming in. You mentioned something like 30% of your budget right now is these one-time funds. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what kind, we're hearing that all this money is becoming available and yet you're strapped all the time. So, where's the budget? Where's the money going? How are you using it? Is it just for service restoration? Is it just for operations? What other Muni needs are you using it for? SFMTA needs? Maybe touch on the issue with the MTC withholding money. Is that a problem or not for you? Sort of that picture.
Excuse me. We're so grateful, for these federal lifelines that have really been such a substantial investment in cities and in transit. And we really don't believe that our city, or really any city in the country, could have recovered without it. But we also expect systems like SFMTA, and to an extent, like maybe a BART or a Golden Gate Transit, to have very long recoveries. The city's sales tax revenue, our parking revenue, and certainly our fare revenue are very, very suppressed, and we expect them to be suppressed for the next several years. So we really need that money to last, and so we are supportive of MTC, considering the not just the immediate needs, but also the more medium-term needs of transit until we can fully stabilize. Kat, I'm seeing you as frozen. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah, it looks.
Go on, Mark.
I was gonna say it looks like it. Poor Cat. I'll throw in a couple of questions, Julie, that have come in, and let me unspotlight poor frozen Cat there. So a couple more that have come in. One, can you just walk folks who may not know through sort of the normal quote unquote way of setting and changing schedules? And then how is that different? And then when would you folks expect to go back to the more normal method of doing it? I know a ton of work usually goes into this, and these are not just done overnight. And I think folks have gotten a little used to seeing service changes, for good or ill, happen pretty fast. So give us that normal, then what we're doing now, and then when you folks are really expecting to kind of return to that business as usual.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So typically we will spend 2 to 3 months designing changes that we want. Well, maybe I should start by saying about 3 times a year, we give operators a chance to pick their work. And they pick it based on seniority. And some people pick work because they love driving a certain route, like they love the 38. And other people pick work because they want a specific schedule. And they know they've got to pick up their kids at 3 o'clock, so they've got to be done at 2 p.m. And we have some people that pick based on finances, and they're always going to try to pick the work that has the longest hours. And other people pick on our extra board, which is those are the people that cover when there's a vacation or when somebody's out sick. And those tend to be people that like to do something different every day and learn a lot of different routes. So operators pick their work, and it's part of their earned seniority right. And the longer you're at the agency, kind of the more control you have over your schedule. During COVID, we took all of that privilege away, and we were basically assigning operators to routes every day in order to get these changes out as quickly as we were getting them out. We have had since the fall, had our bus folks on a schedule, but our rail folks were still assigning them to work every couple weeks, putting them on something else. And so it's one of the many things that we've been grateful for during this pandemic, but we really need to go back to giving folks certainty. So we will be starting rail schedules in the fall, really after we're able to answer the M-line question. And we already have schedules on the bus side. In a typical time period, we would spend 2 to 3 months figuring out what was going to go into a schedule change. It would usually be very small, kind of incremental changes. And then our schedulers would take about 4 to 8 weeks to develop the schedules, another 4 weeks to vet them with the union, and then get them posted. It takes about a week, 10 days for people to pick all their work. So we are doing all that, but in a very compressed time period where these August changes we've been working on for about 4 to 6 weeks. We're handing them over to our schedulers, and they will be getting our union new schedules really by the end of June to start evaluating before we post them. That's probably more than you wanted to know, Mark. It's an area I'm super into, so sorry if I went long.
No, it was awesome. Thank you.
No, that's really great insight. I didn't realize you were doing such like on the fly assignment during COVID, and that must have been really difficult for everybody and makes me appreciate everybody's efforts that much more. Yeah, because they usually do have some like say in it in preparation for it. We're running low on time, so maybe a quicker version, I think. This is not quick either. So a little bit about the rail plan, sort of the between like the S shuttles and how they're working, keeping the J out of the subway. You know, has that helped hurt? Have you heard things? The 3-car ends, when are they coming? Sort of those sorts of bigger picture, how the rail service is evolving questions.
We are working on the new train control system and very excited about that. That is a 5 to 10 year project, but it will mean much more reliable, not only subway service, but also surface service. And I'm hoping for 4-car trains in the subway. I think that folks will see 3-car trains in the subway this fall. We're getting very close. We're upgrading some monitors on the new LRV4s so that operators have kind of an even bigger camera to see what's going on. I think, are going to need more time on a 3-car and Judah. It will be one of our major capital priorities after we get the 20 miles of temporary transit lanes made permanent. Those really have a clock because they time out 120 days after the emergency order. So we really need to direct staff time there before we start engaging in a dialogue or a 3-car in Judah. But we want it, we're excited about it. I think the J line, it is terminating on the surface right now, really out of necessity. And I don't think we have the frequency in the subway right now to really treat that as a true pilot of that change. So right now, I think a lot of J customers are probably hopping on the F line or the L's, which are providing, very frequent surface. They might also be going down to the subway, but it's as we restore more service, get the M line running, I think we'll really be able to give that more of an evaluation. It's intended that J customers that are making that transfer at Market Street are walking down to a frequent subway, and we're not quite there yet.
Right on, understood. Last question, when's the famous favorite boat tram coming back into service?
The summer boats. I don't know. I do know that the boat is in good working condition. So at a minimum, it will make some cameos, staffing permitting. We're actually trying to, same way that I talked about the cable car hours, we're trying to extend the F-line hours to mornings until about 9 or 10 p.m. I think that has to be the first priority. If we have staffing, or maybe on days that we have staffing, we'll also try to do a couple of days of summer boats, but too soon to commit on that yet. We're trying.
Fair enough. Right on. Well, thank you so much for all this. I'm going to hand it over to Mark. And again, thank you and all of your staff for all your hard work on this stuff. I know it's really difficult and we're dealing with really difficult trade-offs. And of course, always keep us posted on how we can support pushing for more service and more Muni and better experience for all riders.
Well, I do want to, well, thank you for this time, by the way, and just helping us to, let people know what's happening. As I said, the pace of change has been intense. I also really want to thank you and Mark for, I have to be at our board meetings, but you guys are real troopers for 6-7 hours in and you're still making comments, which has been great. I've seen you guys really become very strategic and almost like you're telling a story with your public comments. That was especially true for the one California temporary transit lane. We're going to need that kind of support as we look to make these lanes permanent, and everybody on this call that can represent the voice of riders is so much appreciated, because oftentimes the voice of transit riders are not heard, and it's very hard for staff to be that champion. So thank you everybody for coming tonight and for your questions. We got to a lot of them, and thank you for.
Well, thank you so much, Julie, and we really appreciate your time. I don't know if you get combat pay for having to be in some of those public meetings. We don't, but are glad to be there, because the riders and members of San Francisco Transit Riders are really the key to our entire organization. And so while they do get long now and then, it is certainly a privilege on our part to be able to try and bring that rider voice into those spaces as much as we can. And when we can, we really love to get actually the riders to do it themselves and really talk about their experience. That's the most compelling story. Friends, I just want to do a quick reminder, and then I'm going to let everybody go, that our Regional Transit Forum is happening on June 10th. We hope you'll make time to be there for that. And of course, as always, we can use your support in growing our membership by joining us if you'd like to, or by going to sftransitriders.org and donating to our efforts to bring that rider voice to the public processes, to let riders speak for themselves in places we need better service, and really try to move the conversation forward, whether it's with the Board of Supervisors or the Board of SFMTA. And with that, I want to send everybody on their way this evening. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you again, Julie. You don't get to get the big round of applause that we would do if we weren't on Zoom, but we really appreciate your time and being here. And thank you so much. And good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.